What's up, folks? We're about to watch a clip that will kind of explain why Tommy's in jail, and we need to talk about kind of my analysis in light of that. Essentially, like, it doesn't change the fundamental injustice of these reporting restrictions and the overwhelmingly, essentially the wrongness of the ability of judges to summarily put people in jail, but it does shed light on why Tommy's in jail, and so it might give you a better understanding of the UK court system. So we're going to go ahead and play the video so you can kind of see what happened, and the moment that I knew, I was like, that's why the judge threw him in, and that's why the judge probably doesn't hesitate. So we're going to play that right now.
They're young English girls. It's not my concern. This is the problem, you see that? It's not my concern, it's not his concern. Hundreds of young girls have been gang raped in our country, in every town and city across this country. Some of the men are alleged to be in court, the alleged perpetrators are in court today, and people need to know what's going on. People need to know these court cases are happening. Obviously, the problem is you have people like that who think I'm a wanker for reporting on it. Now, there is a reporting restriction on this case.
Pause.
So,
let's go back, play that. Say that one more time, Tommy. Say that one more time.
Obviously, the problem is you have people like that who think I'm a wanker for reporting on it. Now, there is a reporting restriction on this case.
There's a reporting restriction on the case. This is a really bad thing to have said. Shows that he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that there was a court order saying you may not talk about this case, and then he violated it anyway.
So, there's already been stage one of the trial. Think about how big these trials are. Think about the victims here.
He knows that the trial is sequenced. He knows that there are multiple trials going on, but that there's a report, and that they're going on over a long period of time.
This trial only come to light in 2013 when a victim and her mother went to the police. These crimes were between 2004 and 2011. Now, obviously, back then, police ignored it. But I guarantee you the parents would have gone to the police in...
Okay, so we're going to flip around. Okay, done. All right, so let's talk. Been doing a lot of research on reporting restrictions law, and one of the big angles that I was going to approach it from was the idea that, like, there's no database of reporting restrictions in the UK that I can tell. There have been recommendations to put in place a database so people can be aware of whether or not the law has been violated. And then I just thought to myself, hey, maybe I should watch the video and see, like, what Tommy was doing. And I just did that, like, in the last 30 minutes. And within 3 minutes, Tommy basically talks about how he knew there was a reporting restriction in place in the case, right? So this is a very bad admission for Tommy, right? Tommy, because what it means is a reporting restriction is a court order, and the court is ordering you not to publish something. And to do what Tommy did means he is intentionally violating a court order, right? He intentionally violated a court order. That's a really bad thing to do in any court system on the planet, right? Like, and it really doesn't matter how unjust the underlying law is. If you violate a court order intentionally, bad things will happen to you, right? And so the question people are asking is that law legitimate, the reporting ban? I actually don't think it should be there, but there are, like, ways to challenge it. And there might be possibilities of challenging the idea of reporting restrictions, period, right? He could conceivably go to the European Court of Human Rights and challenge the idea of these reporting restrictions and challenges various aspects of his conviction as unjust. But what I'm saying is, to people, is that because he admitted he knew there's a reporting restriction, that's a problem. So some people say he's only mentioning public information, right? That in and of itself is not a defense to violating a court order, right? The thing to understand about these court orders is that they are a reporting restriction, and they ban the reporting of true and accurate information. Now, we find that very odious for good reason. Wow, somebody needs to get blocked. Just a second. That's really obnoxious. Whoever is doing that. I don't even know if I can block this person or something. Periscope's functionality needs to be fixed. Anyway, so we need to, you need to separate the justness of reporting restrictions in the abstract, which I think are actually terribly unjust and really odious in the context of, actually having free speech and a free press, and the violation of court orders, which is kind of a separate concept and something that can, is independently troubling. And so in this case, I was shocked and flabbergasted when I heard the news of Tommy being summarily thrown in jail 4 days ago. I'm no longer shocked, right? I'm no longer shocked. I'm no longer surprised that Tommy was thrown in jail just sort of like instantaneously, because there's no even need, like, understand, like, I also understand why Tommy would have pled guilty or basically admitted to contempt, because he's admitting he knew, like, it's clear he knew there was a reporting ban, right? He knew there was a court order saying don't do X, and then he proceeded to do X, right? Like, that's like, that's pretty profound. Right? Like, it's like, whoa, like, you're knowingly violating a court order. Like, that's something lawyers don't, any lawyer would have told you, do not do that, right? If you know there is a court order in place, like, there are methods to challenge the reporting restriction if you want to try and challenge it, and there are, like, appeals you can take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but defying a court order is a really profound thing to do. And trust me, like, even if in the United States, if you defied a court order, even if that court order was unlawful, right, you'd still get thrown in jail, and it's not likely you would get compensated for it, right? The way to challenge an unjust court order is to appeal it, or to try and get it corrected, and not to just defy it, right? Like, court orders are generally presumptively legitimate, unless it's like something really profound. And I mean, so I think, like, this needs to be framed in the context of how to think about, like, what Tommy did here, and, like, why he was so quickly thrown in jail is suddenly explained, right? Suddenly, because, like, a big question for me, which I was wondering, is, like, why didn't the judge take Tommy's intent seriously, right? It seems like Tommy didn't intend to interfere with court proceedings, and it wasn't clear that he knew anything about a prior reporting ban. But in the video, in the live stream, he actually admits to knowing about a reporting ban, right? So, like, there's not even a question of fact, really, that would have led to the court not deciding he was in contempt. Like, it's 100%. He admits he knew about the existence of a court order. Knowing that is sufficient mens rea, meaning intent, to find you liable, to find a contempt violation. So, really, what remains in terms of, and moreover, like, there's no amount of, like, legal advice he would have been given by his own solicitor that would have precluded this outcome, right? Like, Tommy, it's basically like having done a video admitting to a crime and then wondering, like, what would have happened at trial. Like, you admitted to the necessary elements of the violation, right? So, going forward, I think, like, the defense of Tommy kind of has to be a bit oblique, in the sense that it must kind of rely on a fundamental indictment of United Kingdom law, both as to contempt of court and as to the legitimacy of reporting restrictions in the first place. But in terms of, like, people are trying to find how the court itself acting unlawfully by putting Tommy in jail, I think that argument is no longer particularly persuasive at all, right? It used to be, like, people are, like, saying, oh, the judge needed to recuse themselves. Oh, the judge needed to do this. Like, those arguments are not things anymore, right? Like, Tommy, like, basically admitted to essentially violating a court order, right? So I am thoroughly unsurprised that as a result of, I'm no longer, like, shocked and appalled. I am, like, unsurprised. Somebody's like, I have to agree with you. Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is, and I think there's a number of factors at play here, right? Like, one is, somebody could have cut this clip a long time ago, right? Like, somebody who was trying to justify this, like, could have cut this clip, and everybody could have been like, oh, Tommy knowingly defied a court order. Like, that's why he's in jail. Like, yeah. Somebody says, jailing over an unlawful order is a crime. No, that's not true. Jailing over an unlawful order is not necessarily a crime, even in the United States, right? Unless the order is patently unconstitutional, like, obviously and patently, it is not illegal to jail somebody through an unlawful court order. It's similar to, like, basically, are there unlawful? That's I'm really, really confident. So, like, that's sort of the issue here, right? And I mean, that's not saying that there isn't a profound objection to be made to reporting restrictions, that there's not a profound objection to be made to the reporting restriction on Tommy's case in particular, because of the fact that it basically made it impossible to get good facts, and in a sense it was incredibly counterproductive, right? Like, to some extent I'm the fault, right? Like, I could have watched this video earlier and I didn't. I just took, like, the reports I was getting on Twitter at face value. Not going to make that mistake again in the future. Somebody says, how would I feel if it was your daughter? I'd feel terrible, and I think that justice should come to people. But I don't think that justifies defying court orders just willy-nilly, right? Like, even if my daughter were at issue here, I wouldn't report on something I had been told not to report on by court order. Now, I would try and do my best to legally challenge this law, which I think is gross and unjust. And if it weren't challenged, I would move, but I don't defy court orders. Like, that's not how it works as a lawyer, right? Like, you don't defy it, right? Like, I vehemently disagree with these laws, like, and I think they're gross and tyrannical, right? But, like, you know, and should be overturned. But, like, that does not mean, I think, that the smart, you know, that's not something I would do. Like, some amount, you know, if there has to be respect for the rule of law, I mean, defying court orders is just bad news, man. It's like, it'll get you thrown in jail. Do it in the United States, it will get you thrown in jail. So, like, that said, there are still aspects of this that I find, there are other aspects of this that I find gross. One, that he can be thrown in jail for more than 6 months without a jury trial. That's gross. That's far too much punishment to be summarily handed out. Two, that there's even that these restrictions have criminal liability attached in the first place. I think that's bizarre. I think the punishments that are overwhelming in the context of what the actual underlying offense is. And yeah, somebody says there are a few good lawyers who surmise this pretty well on Twitter. Yeah, credit to them, right? Credit to them. They had a better handle on what likely happened here. And it makes a lot more sense, right? The British court's decisions make more sense now that I understand that Tommy knew there was a reporting restriction and admitted it on tape, right? That's admitting to knowingly and intentionally defying a court order. That's a hell of a thing to do. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to do a tweet storm to this effect to kind of like talk about what happened, because I feel a sort of obligation to be honest with you guys, right? Like, I don't want to, I feel like I helped stir up a lot of shit here, and I bear some responsibility for, you know, putting things back together to the extent that I can. I still think these reporting restrictions are pretty odious. And I think that, you know, that especially in Tommy's case, it was a big mistake to put a restriction on his place. And the punishment is still quite unfair. But by the same token, I still think that there's, like, you know, this helps explain a lot of why the court did what it did. And why a lot of the arguments people are making about how the court acted unlawfully are not very good. Right. So at this point, I'll take questions from people about, like, what happened here. Somebody says we should be happy we live in the USA. I agree. Right. I think, you know, I think that's right. Somebody says you should hold the judge in contempt for impeding the investigation. No, absolutely not. That doesn't make sense. Right. The judge, I mean, the reporting restriction was a bad idea, but it was lifted 3 days later. The overall damage was not substantial. I think it was generally a bad idea. So the UK authorities are up in arms because of Muslim grooming gangs. Well, I mean, it's like, here's the thing. I would be more sympathetic to Tommy if he didn't know there was a court order in place and then had violated it that way. But I lose some sympathy when you defy a court order. I don't know another way to put it. Like, somebody says, so the UK has a secret court system. No, it's not a secret court system. This is proceeding through the normal court. But there's a series of linked trials, which is why, you know, the underlying rationale for why there's a reporting restriction in place. Now, that said, I don't agree with reporting restrictions, period, but it's going through a normal court system. It's not a different court. Somebody says, can his lawyer do anything now about the sentence duration? He might be able to do so to challenge the severity of the sentence, also challenge the lack of a trial. There's avenues to challenge it. In fact, most of them actually are ironically enough, avenues under kind of the European Charter for Human Rights, or the European Convention on Human Rights, rather, which provides a number of protections for free speech and fair trial, some of which are implicated by the way in which Tommy was imprisoned. Somebody says, so a reporting ban in all but name can be found on the court website? Not to my knowledge. I know that there have been recommendations to have an online database of reporting restrictions. I don't know that there's actually one, which is one. I think that's really messed up. That said, like, that doesn't matter in this case because Tommy knew there was a reporting restriction and he violated it anyway, right? It's one thing to, like, be unaware of a reporting restriction and then unintentionally violate it by repeating a BBC article. It's another thing entirely to know that a reporting restriction has been put in place and still go ahead and report on something, right? Then you're knowingly defying a court order. So, yeah, exactly. Somebody says it can be noble to defy bad laws. It can be a form of civil disobedience, right? Like, and if this was framed as, like, Tommy is being is this is civil disobedience. Tommy expects to go to jail for violating an unjust law. That would be a very different sort of, kind of mentality and a different type of approach to this. But that's not what I think has happened here. Somebody says high-level cases in the United States have gag orders on them. That is incorrect insofar as they apply to the press. They do not. Those are unconstitutional, generally, almost always unconstitutional under Nebraska Press Association versus Stewart. Those are prior restraints, which are odious under First Amendment law. And so I think that would be bad. Somebody says, I don't think he expected to go to jail. That's not the relevant intent standard. Tommy thought it was a verdict day, so it wouldn't affect justice. That's not the relevant intent standard. Again, like all these arguments about what he thought, the relevant intent is, did you know you're defying a court order? That's sufficient. Because the court order is a prohibition on publishing even true and accurate information. It's not gone until it's over, right? So, and as Cassandra says, 13 months is still outrageous. It's far too much time. I agree. But like a serious fine would have certainly been called for, I think, given, I'm not even sure called for is the right way, because I think the laws are unjust, but I just am, I'm not surprised, and this is more civil disobedience. Somebody says the court orders because it's a series of trials. Exactly, right? The idea is that the reporting restriction is the United Kingdom's method for protecting protecting the sanctity of jury pools and preventing jurors from knowing information about the case before they sit in judgment. That's why they exist. We don't use that because of the First Amendment. We use things like jury sequestration and heavy juror vetting to protect the fairness of trials. And we also are less sympathetic to arguments about how jurors coming in knowing some information about the case is sufficient to bias them. So that's how we solve this problem. But Britain solves it through the reporting restrictions. Somebody says, so every case in the United States can be reported on by the press? Yes, that's exactly right. And if you're wondering why Americans find what happened to Tommy so objectionable, that's why. We have freedom of the press in this country, and that applies to court cases. There are, these reporting restrictions are totally odious. You say United Kingdom law is better than U.S. law? No, absolutely not, right? Our law is far better. You guys don't take freedom of speech and freedom of the press seriously, right? You guys just imprisoned a guy for talking. What are you doing? Right? Literally, you threw a guy in jail for speaking. That's fucked up. You shouldn't do that, right? Your law is stupid. So I am very unsympathetic to these arguments. I think that because again, and he threw a guy in jail for 13 months without a jury trial to protect the integrity of jury trials. What are you doing? Right? That doesn't make sense. So Cassandra's asking a question. Shoot, Cassandra. Everybody's waiting. Tommy has been refused a press card, so the UK doesn't consider him press. Okay. Does the ban apply to civilians? Yes. Reporting restrictions apply to civilians. Reporting restrictions are not report all individuals publishing things. So, and I would be shocked if Tommy didn't know that the reporting restriction applied to him. Somebody says, he says to me, you're not listening. The case was already in the public domain. No laws broken. That's not true. You can break, even if information has been published before. If somebody puts out a publication postponement going forward, you need to stop talking about the proceedings, right? That's the way that British law works. Again, it's a question of, the question is, did he know about the court order when he broke it? And the answer is yes, right? That's why Tommy's in jail. Somebody says you cannot give someone the right to report and hold them to the same standard. I think the way to think about this is, there is a fundamental problem with reporting restrictions generally, and there is a way in which they privilege elite media over independent media, in the sense that my understanding is elite media has a better time and an easier time understanding when there's a reporting restriction in place. But that doesn't apply to this case because Tommy knew about the reporting restriction, right? I'd be much more sympathetic to these arguments and be much more aggressive about pushing them if Tommy didn't just admit he knew there was a reporting restriction on the case. He just basically admitted he knew he was violating a court order. It's a hell of a thing to admit, right? Somebody says U.S. law let O.J. Simpson get off. Yeah, sometimes jury trials don't go the way people want them to go, but his trial didn't get thrown out. Here's the thing, right? This is one of the better arguments for the way the U.S. does things. People would have said, "Oh, O.J. Simpson was tried by jury well before what happened," right? And so U.S. law is unfair and gives unfair jury trials. Well, O.J. was still acquitted anyway, despite the fact that he did it. He got his fair trial, even though there was enormous publicity, right? Like, the fact that there's publicity around a case doesn't mean you can't get a fair trial. The British are overly squeamish about this. The idea that publicity automatically means that defendants should get a trial thrown out. That doesn't make any sense. And in order to protect create these insanely, impossibly sterile trials, you guys are running riot over your citizens' freedom of speech and free press rights, right? Like, that's the problem. That's why these are so odious. You don't even solve the problems you set out to solve. Like, reporting restrictions don't actually keep juries from knowing about shit. They don't. Like, information gets reported. 1. 2, reporting restrictions can backfire enormously, as they did in this case, right? The reporting restriction on Tommy's case basically meant there was just a shitload of misinformation that got out of there. Nobody was able to quickly be like, hey, this is why Tommy's in jail, because he defied a court order. Here's the exact part where he admits he defied a court order. That's why he was summarily thrown in jail. If that report comes out within a few hours, nobody fucking talks about it anymore. Everybody just gets it. But, like, because there were reporting restrictions on Tommy's case, this thing blew up because everybody's like, what the fuck? Dude's getting thrown in jail. So reporting restrictions are a really blunt instrument, even in the most generous framing. Somebody says easy on the profanity. I do what I want, yo. Like, don't tell me what to do. In general, I try to not swear as much, but yo, don't tell me what to do. You don't like it, you don't have to follow. Somebody says, I expect that's why he did plead guilty. Agreed. Right? So, I mean, I think that this is the missing piece, and this is not, this is the missing piece of what was not in the news, and what hadn't even really been explicitly reported in any of the news articles I read about this, is that Tommy admitted to knowing there was a reporting restriction on the underlying case. That is like a hell of a thing to do, because it's basically admitting you knew that you were defying a court order. It's a hell of a thing to do. Would get you thrown in jail in the United States too, even if the underlying court order was unjust. Like, the proper method is to challenge the court order legally, as opposed to just defy it. It's just a really bad move. So, and besides, I mean, what are there 7-year-olds watching this? Like, I don't think so. This is not like a children's issues. Somebody says, can't you get jailed for burning the flag in the United States? No, you cannot. The First Amendment protects flag burning. In fact, Justice Scalia wrote the opinion, protecting flag burning is a basic right of freedom of expression under the First Amendment of the United States. I don't understand why Brits don't understand that we really do take freedom of speech and freedom of the press seriously in the United States, and that y'all don't. Y'all don't. You guys are not as free as we are when it comes to speech or the press. You are not. Not even close. You guys have just become accustomed to the idea that, like, you think you're freer than us and have a better system, but, like, in very obvious ways, your system is anachronistic, archaic, and tyrannical in ways that our system is totally solved because we have the First Amendment, right? Like, read up on our system, yo. Like, here's the thing, this is why Americans are so pissed off. We are shocked about how authoritarian your system is and how little freedom of speech and freedom of the press you have. It, like, doesn't make sense to us. Like, honestly. Like, it really does not make sense to me. I don't know, I mean, you guys in the thread can back me up on this. Like, but, like, most of us, like, would just be shocked by how ridiculous your system is. You know? So, and, like, the Brits think we're this tyrannical system because of, like, Iraq and stuff, but, okay, our country's a superpower and invaded stuff. So did yours, by the way. But the broader point is, like, you guys just tolerate a lot more internal restrictions on your own freedom than we do. Period. Right? Like, so it's a lot worse, right? Like, yeah, if you're noticing this, like, every American on the feed is like, your laws are ridiculous. Because your laws are ridiculous. Like, you can solve the problem of fair trials without banning anybody from speaking about them. Somebody says, yeah, no, look at all this. Yeah, no, everybody's upset at the UK. So, exactly. You guys don't have a Second Amendment. You don't have the right to bear arms. You don't have a First Amendment. You don't have the right to speak freely. You don't have the right to free press. The press can't say what it wants when it wants. You are laboring under incredible restrictions on your freedom of speech and your freedom to protect yourselves that we don't have. Right? So, yeah, you can't defend yourselves. Like, I mean, we would find these restrictions intolerable. So. Maybe not liberals. Like, I mean, I know that, like, liberals would totally be okay with this sort of government authority and tyranny, but, like, a large section of Americans aren't. You know? So, yeah, be proud to be an American. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up. We've been kind of going for a while here. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, follow me at Will Chamberlain on Twitter, at Will Chamberlain on Periscope. And I'm going to try and like cut a little piece of this together so you kind of understand and write it out in a thread so more people can understand. Hopefully you share that, because I think it's important to kind of correct the record a little bit in terms of understanding why the United Kingdom did this. So, appreciate it. Thanks for watching. And I'm praying for Tommy too. So, anyway, peace out, guys.